Have you wondered what the future has in store for indie authors when it comes to their intellectual property? Well, this episode is going to talk about that, and it's going to be a little bit different because I had the opportunity to talk to four of the top names in science fiction. Three of these names are names that you see on a regular basis in the top 100 of science fiction. And all three of these people have figured out some interesting ways that they can bring their story world to their fans. So in this episode, we're going to be talking to Mel Cooper, Chris Fox, and Scott Bartlett about what they're doing with their intellectual property to merchandise it and bring it to their fans. Each one of these authors I had a long interview with, which I'll also post, but I thought it'd be cool to kind of mash them all together and bring them into this one episode that is a little more easy to digest, and I get to play around with some production value.
My name is Mallory Cooper. I write science fiction under the pen name M.D. Cooper. I also wrote a book called Help My Facebook Ads Suck, and that's you can find that on Amazon under Mal Cooper. But most of my work is spent writing science fiction. I created a universe called Aeon 14. It's this massive future science fiction universe that currently has 90 books out in it. And one of those books, or two of the series are about a character named Rika. And that's what this whole Kickstarter is about, is actually doing more audio for Rika.
Sure. So for your audience, they probably know me best from books like 5,000 Words Per Hour or Right to Market, maybe Six Figure Author. I write science fiction and fantasy. That's where the money comes from. And my flagship series is called the Magitech Chronicles, which is epic space fantasy. Think dragons tearing apart starships, gods blowing up planets, that sort of thing. And the project on Kickstarter that I'm working on is a role-playing game set in that same universe where I've got the novels.
Tom, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right, cool. So I'm Tom Edwards. I'm an artist from the UK, mainly doing book covers. Science fiction and fantasy are what I focus on. And I've been working for myself for about 5 years now. So in that time, I've probably done over 100, easily 100 covers for some of the bigger names in sci-fi on Amazon. So obviously Scott Bartlett, Chris Fox, Craig Martell, Michael Forbes. There's quite a few big hitters in there. So that's really helped me get my name out there for other authors. And then recently I've been looking into other avenues to help authors kind of build their IP, especially around the artwork side of it. So not just the book covers, but character designs, 3D prints, ship designs, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what I do for my day job. I'm a big fan of sci-fi, and I read a lot of the books the authors write, and big fans of a lot of my clients. So it's quite a nice, rewarding job for me.
All right, so I'm Scott Bartlett. I write military sci-fi and space opera. Some of my series are Ixen Prophecies, Ixen Legacy, Spacers. So mostly spaceship focused combat.
I know from you and I talking, you were a little hesitant about Kickstarter. What got you over the hump? And
well, part of it was seeing how well you did. That you ran a Kickstarter, you got your narration back, and then Michael Scott Earl has run some Kickstarters that work really well for him. And I saw that and just realized that worst case scenario, it doesn't work. It's not the end of the world. But actually, the way it's going already, it's definitely going to get funded. There's no question about it.
Yeah, when I did it, and I don't have nearly the audience that you have, or the number of books, it was really just to figure out if there was that potential there. And I think it boils down to what if you're realistic about what you're trying to do. Like, I pushed it a bit with a $5,000 raise, given the size of, my audience. I think a $10,000 raise with the size of your audience is a reasonable expectation. Mm-hmm. And when you look at, like you said, Michael Scott Earl, or you look at Michael Sullivan, the kind of money that they're doing, they're doing six figures in one Kickstarter.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
It's pretty amazing. So the audience is there.
Yeah. This one being that this is a series that's actually over a year old now. Like the last book in the series came out a year ago. So the fact that, so that's part of the reason why I went for a little bit lower number, because a lot of my fans have already read this series and forgotten about it.
Yeah.
Respects. So that's part of the reason why I'm going a little bit lower. I think if it was something brand new, I probably could get a little bit higher faster, but I'm so confident I'm going to hit my number. It's pretty much
Well, and I think there's on Kickstarter, this is kind of an early thing, the whole funding audio projects. It certainly works, and there's a lot of them on there that have gone this way. But it isn't like in the gaming world where there's this rabid audience that is after projects on Kickstarter. So I think that's the other thing that'll change over time is you're an early adopter of this as a way of raising money.
I was at a game developer conference I was at PAX over this last weekend, and on the Thursday I was at the game dev portion of the conference, and they actually had the director of games from Kickstarter was there speaking, and she said that games in general do better than average on Kickstarter, and especially any sort of paper physical game. Those things have like a 60% success rate. And on average, Kickstarter only has about a 30% success.
Yeah,
they do really well. There are people just signed up for those things. Like you said.
Sure. Yeah. So in addition to doing like 20 plus covers, Tom and I have done a couple of cool partnerships and sort of experimented, and I guess pairing the story world with the artwork. Which one was, Tom, when you did that the most recent, I think, pre-made cover series? Was it 8 or 9?
I think I'm on series 8 now.
Okay, 8, yeah. So Tom sent me a piece of artwork and asked me to write sort of like flash fiction, like a story that's like just basically a paragraph to go with the cover to help promote it. And that was a lot of fun for me to do, and kind of gave us a chance to branch out from the traditional. If there have even been indie authors long enough to use the word traditional, but the traditional indie author cover artist sort of partnership. And then, so the way that the 3D model idea evolved was, well, Tom, I know you've been looking at giving this offering for a while as part of helping authors build their IP.
Yeah.
So Tom decided for the Keystroke Medium Covers for a Cure charity, that he would make a 3D model available paired with one of the covers that he was selling. So I ended up bidding on that cover and winning, and I decided to use it for my Spacers series. And he also sent me a 3D print of the ship from the cover that I bought. So I now have a ship from the Spacers series. I'm getting the original ship from him too. That's another topic, but. So yeah, Tom sent me that as part of me winning that, and I thought it looked really cool. The detail on it was just like really fine. So and then I decided for my next Spacers launch, I would give away a 3D print to someone who like participated in the Facebook Live, just to sort of like celebrate the launch and get the word out there about the ebooks. So and then I think. Tom, was it you approached me or was it I approached you about making these, offering these to my fans? I believe it might have been your idea originally.
I think, yeah, because originally I wanted to kind of sell obviously print the ships I make and sell them, but obviously I want to work in contact with the authors of the books because obviously they own the ships themselves. So, I think I contacted you when we worked out kind of a pricing structure and that kind of thing and how to kind of work together on the whole project.
Yeah, exactly. So this has kind of been like the pilot, I guess, launch. We're sort of experimenting with it, but that's the origin story of how this project got started.
Well, let's see some of these, Tom. You got a few you can hold up? Or...
Yeah, so this is one of the originals. So that was from the charity cover. The two fins at the back have broke off, but this was an early one. But it's been roughly painted anyway, the base colours. And then the one we're actually doing at the moment, so this is the fully painted version. There we go.
That's one from my Super Carrier book.
That's the one.
So that's the one we're talking about where you can actually buy that through your mailing list.
Yeah. Well, the way we did it was I kind of told my subscribers, just tell me a ship on any of my series, and we can send it to you. What we'll probably do going forward is focus on like a per series. Like when I'm launching, say, my new Spacers book or my new Mothership book, I'll focus on marketing ships from that series in particular.
I'd love to hear how you came about developing the idea of doing a game off the books and the kind of the behind the scenes work to actually get the game to work.
Okay, so some of the best advice I can give anybody watching or listening to this is find the intersection of your unique skill set. And this is my unique skill set. I've been GMing these games since I was, if you can believe it, 6 years old. I've been playing since the very early 1980s and have so many thousands of hours into various games. And I saw a whole bunch of systems when I was growing up, and we're talking dozens of various gaming systems. So over time, I started figuring out which ones worked and which ones didn't. And eventually a lot of theory came into it, and I started crafting my own system. And so from 18 to 43, I've just been tinkering, 25 years.
Wow. So this has been something that's kind of like some people talk about writing a book. They've been working on it for 20 years. You've
I just didn't think it could be monetized. But then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm an Amazon bestselling author. Why can't I monetize this? And I figured I'd give it a try.
Well, and now that you're on Kickstarter, I would say it's probably nowhere near as big as the book market, but I mean, there's such a significant market for fantasy role-playing games.
Altered Carbon, it just finished up, and I didn't look to see what their final number was, but the last time I checked, it was like $300,000 for their Kickstarter. So if you have the right property and can get it in front of people, there's a voracious audience. It's actually growing, not shrinking, thanks to things like Critical Role. Kickstarter is a massive tool for visibility. It's a great way to get yourself in front of a lot of people very quickly, especially if you're willing to advertise aggressively. So I'm talking YouTube ads, I'm talking Twitter ads, I'm talking Facebook ads. I'm putting yourself out there because instead of selling a book, a $5 book, you're asking people, please help us, which is always better than asking them to buy something, and they can contribute what they want. And that could be $1, that could be $1,000. And in one contributor's case, that's $5,000 for my Kickstarter. So people can kind of pay what they're interested in doing. And that means regardless of your situation, if it looks interesting, they're going to do something at some level. And the price difference is so massive where I'm used to, okay, I'm selling a 99-cent, book to get you into my funnel. I'm going to lose money on that. Whereas when I'm advertising for a Kickstarter, I might spend $20 in ads and get like $400 in contributions.
What's your average contribution or pledge on Kickstarter?
$112 right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think mine, when I did the audio project, was 35, and a male told me the other day with her, she was like 70. So I think that's the other thing for authors to think about. Like, how many books do you have to get to $130 in revenue? And the other question I'd have for you is looking at, because actually in Kickstarter, you can see all this stuff. How's the breakdown of people that are backing your project? How many are coming from Kickstarter? How many are coming from your mailing list? How many, can you kind of give a breakdown of those numbers?
Yeah, so early on, most of it was my mailing list and or Facebook, because I advertised very aggressive on those two platforms. Because I knew on Facebook, lots of people knew me and hopefully would contribute to the Kickstarter, and that worked. As soon as it was funded, I then turned ads on Reddit because people want to see that a Kickstarter is funded before they invest. It's like the cardinal rule. So as soon as I knew that I could do that, I started advertising on other platforms, and those are cold sales. I'm not telling anybody about the game. They've never seen it before. Many of them don't read fiction at all and don't care that there's novels. They're just seeing a new role-playing game with a dragon tearing apart a starship, and they're like, what's that?
And then do you have a percentage how many are just coming right from Kickstarter? Because I know they show those numbers.
They have like 4 or 5 different search areas that they come from, but if you can compile it all, I'd say close to 20%. But I suspect the vast majority of it is from external advertising. So if you just went to Kickstarter and you put a Kickstarter up there, you're probably not going to find a ton of cold sales. And I don't think it's going to sustain your Kickstarter. It's definitely icing on your cake, though.
People watching, like the differences in where these people are coming from, like how many are you feel are your existing fans? How many are finding you just on Kickstarter, which would essentially be a new audience?
Yeah.
And,
So I think that, I only have, was it 40 backers, 49 backers, somewhere in that neighborhood at this point.
47.
47. And Kickstarter statistics tell me that 44% of the people that have backed me came from Kickstarter. Now, some of them might have been people that maybe that signed up for a notification, but some of those might have come from Kickstarter too. It's hard to say. So it's even worst case scenario, and that some of that number is a bit inflated. I'm probably getting 30% of these people are new, which is great. It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
And some people actually are signing up for just the card game. I have a card game that you can get in here as well as one of my rewards. And it's something I've had for a little while. I'm doing a version of it's going to be specific to this group of characters and a version of the game that they play. Because my card game is a game that the characters play in the books. And I've actually got a number of people that's gone just for that because they're not interested in the audio, but they're fans, or maybe they're just into card games.
Mm-hmm. How many of those have you had pledged?
I think I've got like 4 or 5 people who just went for that.
And how much is that pledge level?
It's $20.
Okay. So even that, you think about that in comparison, granted, you're not doing this to like be a sales channel, but it is raising revenue. You think about the revenue you're raising per pledge.
Mm-hmm.
What would you, if you kind of had to make a guess of the gross margin on that?
I mean, on that particular one, it's probably 50% of that's just margin.
Yeah.
Because I think that the cards cost me around $7 a deck. And then I also have a printed rule sheet that I got that's probably around 10. Shipping of both of those things is in there a little bit. So I probably spend about $10 or $11 per deck to get them.
Yeah. And when we were talking before, that the deck was something you had. You were doing this. How were you using it prior to Kickstarter?
Most of the time before that, it was sort of like if you found me at a conference, you'd get a deck. So I use it for like a fun marketing tactic to get people to come to conferences and stuff like that, or a reward for showing up. I've been meaning to actually advertise and put it up on Etsy for some time, but it just sort of fallen by the wayside. I'm sitting there with like 200 of these decks sitting there in my office. I need to do something with these. But the flip side, another thing I'm doing is, except for the audiobook itself, and then one other reward that I'm going to add in soon, every single thing that comes with this Kickstarter is going to be custom just to this Kickstarter. So it's all collector stuff. The only way though the card deck will be the standard card deck, the rule sheet is going to be a special rule sheet. And it's going to be like a printed 2-side glossy rule sheet thing that only people who back this Kickstarter will get. And then some of the pledge levels get you a special edition of the Rika Outcast book, which is the first book in the series. And the art on that edition of the book, and even some of the internal stuff in that book, is only ever going to be given to people who do this Kickstarter. So it's sort of a big thing I want to do. So even people who can't pledge a lot, I'm like, if you just pledge like $10, $20 now, and then once it's fully backed, I'll be doing, like, when you fulfill a Kickstarter, you do what's called a survey, and you have to get the information you need from people to ship and whatnot. And you can also bundle in add-ons. I'm using Pledge Manager that lets you put a bunch of add-ons in, and if someone wants to buy, like, pick and choose like a one-off, maybe something from one of the higher tiers, they can do that. I mean, if you can pledge higher, that's better, because that ensures that we're going to get funded and maybe hit some of the stretch goals, which start to make some pretty cool stuff up here. But that's a way of making it so people, just by getting in on this at any level, will be able to get some of the cool swag that's, like I said, only going to be available to folks who do that.
I was going to say, I should say too, I could see this becoming a thing for indie authors, especially for sci-fi indie authors, just because whenever I've talked about it on Facebook, there seems to be a lot of buzz, and I've gotten a lot of indie authors sharing it and saying, hey, space opera writers, this is really cool. Check this out. So I feel like we may be at the beginning of something here.
I hope so. Yeah.
Well, Tom and I were talking before you jumped on, Scott. I've been playing Warhammer for years. My kids play it. I mean, for some folks, that is a a pastime. Like I like to paint models. I paint way more models than I ever play in the game, right? That's the hobby unto itself. And to for folks that are into that, to be able to paint, you know, mechs or spaceships from your series and that are how they're supposed to be for the canon of that story world, that's an awesome experience for those kind of fans.
Definitely. It's a whole new way to interact with the story world.
Mm-hmm. So can you guys tell me a little bit about like how you kind of prepared to do this launch, and maybe some of the life lessons you've gotten out of doing it, what works, what hasn't been working, that kind of stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So I kind of, I think I teased it originally in the original giveaway that I associated with the spacers, that maybe we'd be making it available. And then I posted it on Facebook and said, you know, we're doing a run of so many, and on my newsletter and things. So we've sold a few models and it's been good, but we have learned some lessons on how we can do it better next time. So one thing is just like I mentioned, I think the tack of saying that, you know, you can get a ship from any of my books, it's sort of abstract, and you're not really pointing to say super carrier and you can have this awesome ship. Instead, you're saying you can have a ship. You're almost trying to sell a concept at that point, you know. So that was one thing. The exclusivity thing that you talked about, you know, making it something that was more tied into a given launch or campaign, I think that could be powerful. And yeah, maybe I think we're going to experiment with price a little bit. We did do a little research beforehand and spoke to some people who were collectors of models, and you know what we could reasonably expect to charge, and of course we have our own costs, you know, Tom's production costs and shipping costs and things that we need to build into that and still make sure we're making a profit. So I think we're going to play with price a little bit. We're going to, you know, zero in on specific ships and focus on a series at a time going forward. And that's sort of where I'm at in terms of evolving the process. I think Tom's art sort of sells itself, and the spaceships sell themselves, but we just need to not try to throw 20 spaceships at them at once. I think that's the trick.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the other things that I've seen with talking to authors that are trying some other ways to, you know, use their intellectual property, it's understanding the right channels. So like, I don't not necessarily have any ideas, but there may be channels out there where there's really, you know, avid model makers that would look for something like this that you then pull into the books, right? It's like we were talking about Chris Fox with his role-playing game. The obvious place to do that is Kickstarter, because that's where those people are. And is it, you know, maybe is that a channel where people are looking to buy limited edition models? I don't know.
Potentially, yeah. I definitely consider Kickstarter as a venue for this, for sure. And another thing I should mention too is, you know, we're not necessarily like looking to make a pile of money here. I think for Tom and I, it's something extra for fans of Tom's art and for fans of my books, and it's like an experience for them. And both Tom and I have sort of gone above and beyond, I feel, to make it a special experience, and to not just give, you know, the bare minimum of what we promised, but to give some little extra surprises to include in there. So I think that the people who did order the models are going to be pleasantly surprised. One thing we did do is Tom got some really nice packaging for them, and he also got an art card where, I don't know if you have that art card.
Yeah, I can show it. I've got the box as well. Shall I show you the box?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So that's the.
Oh wow.
Like a magnet clip. And then that's the art card. So that's the ship.
And that's going to be signed by Tom too.
Yeah, so it'll have a print number and my signature, if it's worth anything.
Well, thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. I appreciate you sticking around, and hopefully you found this material relevant to your business and helpful to making some decisions about how you're going to be merchandising your intellectual property in the future. If you would like to see the full-length videos, there's links to those videos here, and you can find all those videos plus much, much more on the channel talking about the business of writing. Again, if you like this, please subscribe and click that notification bell so that you can see upcoming videos. Typically put about one a week out.